general manager of the New York Jets, Mike Maccagnan, here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Mike?
Good, Rich. How are you doing today?
I'm doing. Give me your favorite Charlie Casserly story, just to start this thing off. Give me your best one.
Oh no, you're gonna put me on the spot.
Oh, come on now. It's all good.
Let's see. Good Lord, I don't know if I know a good one off the top of my head. There's I spent so much time with them. I think that the one thing I would say with Charlie is, having worked with Charlie for so many years, and when you get a chance to kind of see him on TV, there's a little bit of there's a way that Charlie has these mannerisms that just kind of inflections in his voice, which I'm so used to hearing all the time when I was working with him, and of course to see him doing it on TV, it kind of cracks me up a little bit and makes me laugh. But I love Charlie. He was a great guy to work for, and really from a mentorship standpoint, I mean, he was always very I don't know, almost being like a teacher when I worked with him and tried to explain things and really help me obviously prepare for the job I currently am in.
Well, it's interesting that the what just happened at the top of this draft might be, since the NFL Network's been covering it at the very least, the biggest surprise since the top of this year's draft was going for Mario Williams instead of Reggie Bush, and I'm sure you were in the room for that whole discussion.
Yeah, I remember
right,
that. I remember that whole thing very distinctly. And the other one too was Vince Young that year, because of course being in Houston, that was a bit of a hometown favorite. Having Vince was actually from Houston, so. But no, that was a big deal. That was I remember that one. In fact, now obviously I knew kind of in advance what we were going to do. But you know what, really, Rich, it's a different NFL now, because back then you had the ability to actually enter negotiations with the player and before the draft started. And I think at that point in time, I believe you have the ability to kind of reach out to agents and start talking to them about being the first pick. And of course that obviously turns right around and leaks out to the media. So nowadays it's a little different. And even this year's draft, it was kind of kind of not knowing what was going to happen at one. Usually you have a little bit of a feel as you get closer to it. It kind of firms up. But this year was obviously right until the last minute. We weren't really sure what was going to happen at one and how it unfolded. Not only have to surprise us, but it was interesting. It wasn't something we had kind of thought of potentially happening based on a lot of research we did until literally the day of the draft.
So Mike Maccagnan, Jets general manager here on the Rich Eisen Show. So what would you term yourself as you're sitting there watching the commissioner named Baker Mayfield, if not surprised?
Well, I would say, it was interesting that, in the previous drafts I've been in, and, obviously I've been in the NFL for many years, but as a general manager, at least, when Leonard Williams came out, we were at 6. Maybe about 4 or 5 days before the draft, there was some grumblings of who was going to go, in what spot. And we knew there's some good players in that draft. We knew there's a chance a good player would fall to us. But about 4 or 5 days in advance, we started really going to feel that, hey, there may be a viable scenario that Leonard would be there at 6, and we felt very good about that opportunity. Last year with Jamal, again, maybe a few days out, 2-3 days out, we started starting to get a feel for how the draft may fall out, and we realized at 6 we may have a chance to get Jamal. This year, and we did a lot of work, and we felt pretty well prepared for this draft, especially when we made the trade up from 6 to 3. But this year, leading up to it, there's a number of different names that are kind of floating around, and we always kind of thought Sam was sort of a consistent one in that spot. At least that's how a lot of the the impression we had from a lot of the information we were gathering. But really, the day of the draft, that's when there was some late breaking, at least information or news that it may be Baker Mayfield. So that was interesting. And of course, as the draft unfolded, you never really know what's going to happen until you're on the clock. And we're like everybody else, sort of sitting there watching and trying to get, figure out who was actually getting the phone call. And we saw Baker take the call, that we realized it was him. And not necessarily surprised. He's a good player in his own right, but again, I think our impression was, all through the process, that Sam would have probably been picked at 1, and then there was always this possible scenario at 2, and then the other scenario of that maybe somebody trading up to 2 to take him, or maybe the Giants would trade out of that pick, or we knew they liked the running back quite a bit, and Saquon, they got a heck of a player in him, but yeah, it just kind of unfolded. It wasn't, but I think really you do so much work in advance. You're very calm. At least I'm very calm during the draft, and kind of wait and see what falls to you. And of course, when it presented itself, we felt very good that to take Sam in the 3rd spot. There were a lot of, like I said, but when we made the trade up, we felt very good sitting at 3. So we thought we were in a really good position there.
So let me ask you this question, Mike Maccagnan: had Darnold gone first, and you had a choice between Mayfield and Rosen, who would you have taken?
Well, it's interesting. I remember John Dorsey said his wife didn't even know who they were going to take with the number one pick.
Yeah,
My wife actually does
by
know.
the way,
So
that was a red flag, Mike. That was a red flag. That's not true. That's a red flag.
I know. But no, I think, to be perfectly honest, we're very happy with where Sam, and obviously we made the decision with him there. And, I don't really get into hypotheticals and other scenarios, but there are some really good players in this draft. Baker we thought very highly of along with Josh. So, we felt it was and even, Josh Allen and Josh Rosen. So, we really felt we were in a good position when we made that trade up. So we're just happy we got Sam, and we're kind of excited to see how he does going forward.
What do you make of the news that Baker Mayfield's agent says the Patriots were interested in too? What do you think of that? Do you think there's anything there, Mike?
You never really know. I mean, I think it's, we don't always know what other teams are thinking or doing. I think I would simply say is the Patriots have to come from very far back. That would be very hard, I would think, to get all the way up to 2, but you never know. But most of that stuff, I think when you actually go into the draft and you do so much work in preparation for it, and then you make your picks, from a team standpoint, you really don't look at the hypotheticals. I mean, the media, I think, tends to kind of analyze all that stuff. And but, of course, I mean, literally, maybe it's in a passing conversation, but for the most part, we're more focused on, getting back to work and trying to figure out ways to make this team better. So that's, I don't give that too much thought, but to go all the way from where the Patriots were picking at 31 to 2 is just a long way to go. And, of course, what they would have to give up to get there would be, I really wouldn't know. It'd be interesting.
A few more minutes with Mike Maccagnan, Jets general manager. And before I turn the page about the future of the Jets, I do want to turn back to February and March when you were making the decision about what you were going to do in free agency and the draft. If there were all these prospects like Darnold, Rosen, and Mayfield, why make a play for Kirk Cousins, especially since it might have given an indication to the person with whom you're trading the idea that you might not be getting Kirk Cousins if you're knocking on his door to move up in the draft, Mike?
Well, I think, Rich, so if I can kind of go back in time a little bit. So, we do so much work in preparation for the draft. We've done quite a bit of work on this draft class, and felt really good, not just on some of the higher profile quarterbacks, but other players in the draft, because really you have to almost know the pool when trying to make decisions about where to, again, if you make a trade and where to position yourself. But if we go back in time a little bit, I know myself and Brian Heimerdinger, kind of my right hand. We talked a lot about that, and we talked about it with Todd and ownership, and about what our plan was. Because really, what you do is you map out pro free agency, and then you map out in the college draft to a certain degree. You don't really map out; you really analyze the college draft. You try to make sure you get your stack right, but really you put a lot of emphasis on pro free agency. And of course, pro free agency is a way we feel at least not only to add talent, but also to, to a certain degree, fill needs and build the roster. So when we went to the pro free agency, we thought it was a unique scenario with quite frankly, Kirk Cousins being available. I think that doesn't happen very often in pro free agency. I think everybody obviously has talked about this, where a quarterback, even though he was, literally 29, 30 years old, still going into the prime of his career, and we thought played at a pretty high level. So again, it's an opportunity in that market to add a player. So we felt, hey, this doesn't happen very often. We thought it was a bit of an aberration just based on how the scenario played itself out. So we realized, hey, this is a chance to go get what we felt was a very good quarterback. Now, of course, as we're doing that, and we realized that, hey, it's pro free agency, they can, we can obviously, players can sign wherever they want to sign, and you obviously make your offers competitive. You can make it and work within your salary cap structure and the structure of how you shape up your teams. But going into that, as we're kind of preparing ourselves in our free agency plan to go try to land Kirk Cousins, at the same time, we're also planning ahead, like, okay, what happens next? And that's where myself and Brian in particular, he was with me the whole process. We figured out, or we decided that, okay, if we don't get Kirk Cousins, the next thing to do is then to pivot in the draft, or pivot in preparation for the draft. Try to do something that's a little ahead of, a little in advance, or a little preemptive, and move up in the draft to position ourselves to, take a very good player. And of course, this was a draft with a lot of good quarterbacks in it, and we thought, as we sort of planned it, we positioned ourselves, realistically at 3. Part of it was for the compensation we did was to ideally hold on to our first-round draft pick next year. So we obviously paid a pretty good price, above market price for the pick when you look at trade charts. But, of course, when you're dealing with quarterbacks, those trade charts are kind of skewed. They kind of go out the window. we also felt if we waited longer and tried to make a trade closer to the draft, or if a player was sliding when, again, there's more suitors in play, the idea would then you'd have to pay more of a premium at that point in time. And by positioning ourselves with the third pick with what we paid for it, even though we paid a little, above market value, we thought it kind of made the ability for somebody to move ahead of us even more difficult. Now, whether or not, how that played out, that, to be determined, but we felt pretty good about that. And really, if you think back to pro free agency, when we found out we were out of, we were the second team, not the first team for Kirk Cousins, at about the same time I literally was on the road at Baker Mayfield's pro day, at Josh Rosen's pro day. And obviously, we'd done a lot of work on both those guys, Sam Darnold and Josh Allen, who had later pro days, but we'd already seen them at the combine. We felt very good about positioning ourselves at that third spot, especially when we were able to facilitate a trade that allowed us to keep our first. And with having that first going forward, obviously, it's in our minds, another good piece to build with. But if we opt to hypothetically trade back in the first round, we have the ability to regain or recoup our second-round draft pick that we gave to move up in that trade. So that's really the thought process and the logic in it. And of course, when we missed out on Kirk Cousins, it was always you have all these contingency plans in place, and we pretty much executed what our plan was. And we kind of pivoted and went out there, reached out to Indy. We kind of tried to figure out what we could get in terms of price and compensation and what we'd have to give up. And we knew the Giants, we knew our impression from Cleveland was they were going to stay at 1, and it would have taken a king's ransom to try to get that pick, but they always seemed to be locked in at 1. And the Giants, we felt very strongly that they were going to, sit there at 2 in a very good position and to get a very good player. And, whether it was a quarterback they would take or trade out, or Saquon Barkley or another player, like we felt, we were going to position ourselves well for, adding the player we added. I will say this, at the time, we never, we went through all the scenarios of who may be available. In regards to Sam, I think we always sort of thought or expected him to be, one of the first pick in the draft or possibly second pick. But when it played itself out that he was available, we felt very good about it. And, and we're very happy at that point in time to make that decision. But that being said, there was a lot of good players at 3 we were very comfortable with taking if it wasn't him.
So then a couple quick hitters for you, Mike, in a couple minutes that we have left here. What is the plan for Sam Darnold to start this year?
Yeah, I think everybody, Todd has said this publicly. We've talked about this internally, like, how, what our plan is for Sam. I think we're going to, as Todd said, we're going to basically expose him to everything. We're going to give him the opportunity to go out there, earn the position. But of course, our focus is not necessarily to throw him into the fire until he's earned it. And but we're very excited about him and his upside and potential. And we have a lot of football to be played this spring and in training camp, and we'll see how it comes along. He's going to have every opportunity to go out there and hopefully fulfill all the potential we see in him.
So he has the opportunity to earn the job week 1. Based on where we're sitting here right now.
I would say nothing's been predetermined one way or the other, and Todd's going to make that decision after we go through this off season. And there's a chance for anything on the table. Nothing's been sort of set in stone in terms of how we're going to do this, but in terms of a firm time frame. But it's also going to be, he's going to have every opportunity, and we'll see how it develops going forward.
And unless you are going to form 2 Big 3 teams for Cube's Big 3 league, you're going to have to do something at the quarterback spot in that room, right, Mike?
Yeah, I think we obviously know we have a decision to make here, and that'll work itself out here, and kind of due process, due time. But again, that's we know we have a tough decision to make, and but we're also feel very good about our team as a whole. We're not where we exactly want to be, but we think we have a very competitive room in that quarterback room, especially adding Sam Darnold, and we had Teddy Bridgewater and Josh McCown and the 2 young quarterbacks, Christian and Bryce. So we'll see how this all plays out.
All right. And lastly, if you're in an airport and a volleyball team of the school of a top prospect that you're interested in drafting is there, and the coach says, talk to the girlfriend if you want to know more about the prospect, do you talk to the girlfriend in the airport, Mike? Do you do that?
I think we're like every other person out there in terms of always trying to gather information.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. Alonzo is a good friend of mine, and I have the utmost respect for him. But I will say this: I think we do as a league, in what we do, and I've been scouting for a long time. It's a very subjective process. We gather lots of information on these players, not only how we evaluate them off of tape and live exposure, but we also gather a lot of information because in the end, Rich, we're trying to invest in a person. So you try to gather as much as you can and go forward.
So is that a no? You don't ask?
I don't know if I've ever been in that scenario before where I've been around a volleyball team of a prospect, but I would say simply, it's a little bit speculative. I'm not sure. I think I'm not sure what I would do, quite frankly. So I may take the fifth on that one.
Well,
but
you and Brady are taking fifths. Look at you, Mike.
I know. I'm just joking. But no, but like I said, that was. But you'd probably be surprised at how many people we actually talked to about doing our research on these guys. So,
Mike, I've enjoyed our chat. Let's not be strangers. Okay.
Absolutely, Rich. Anytime, my man.
You got that's right back at you. That's Mike Maccagnan, Jets general manager.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.